What's up everyone, I'm Eldritch and we are once again talking about the Camelot Unchained Class Reveal that happened last week. Yes, last week's class reveal was on Wednesday, so I had a really long time to finish this video. Yes, I know, it's Sunday now, but listen, okay, listen. I also have other things to do. I'm sorry that it's late again, but I guess you're just gonna have to get used to how donkeys measure time, and that's pretty much if I say Saturday, it's Sunday. If I say next week, it's probably next week plus 2 days. However, let's get to the meat and potatoes. There were of course only two choices left, D and I. And the community chose D, and that turned out to be the healers. Now with the healers chosen this week, that really only leaves the Veil Walkers, aka Veil Stalkers, aka Assassins, aka Stabbykin, aka Pests, aka Dagger Fairies for next week. And then after that we're done with the class releases. It pains my heart. But no worries, I will keep making videos about Camelot Unchained because I'm really looking forward to this game. And there is still a lot that I can talk about even without having any gameplay footage. So healers are actually the first reveal to spark a little bit of a heated discussion within the community, with a sizable amount of players who traditionally enjoy healing classes having a number of concerns with the systems presented. And I wanted to address all of it in this video, but as it turns out that video would have been way too long. And so instead I will just explain how the wound system actually works so that you can understand the healing classes presented a little bit better. And then I will just handle the trio normally like I've done with the other 8 episodes. And then I will have an in-depth discussion video about this entire system, what I think about it, opinions and all of that stuff tomorrow. And I know, 2 Camelot Unchained videos in 1 week? Oh my god, that's crazy! But I have decided to make videos about whatever the balls I want, whenever the balls I want. That's right, from here on out it's Anarchy Donkey. I do whatever I want and nobody can stop me. So here's how the wound system was pitched, or more accurately, how I understand it. Your character has an overall blood pool and then a set of body parts. Let's say for this example, they are head, torso, left arm, left leg, and right leg. Each of those body parts has a separate hit point pool and a set of wound markers. For this example again, let's call them 3 for arms, 3 for legs, 3 for the head, and 5 for the torso. When you take damage, you take it specifically to one of the body parts. If a body part's hit point pool reaches 0, the character takes a wound and a trauma. Trauma is a temporary physical debuff that causes bleeding damage, which in turn is removed from the character's overall blood pool. Trauma can however be removed early through a healer putting enough overhealing on the specific body part. Wounds are permanent and last until a character dies, but healers can cure wounds individually. Think of it as cleansing a debuff really. Once a limb has taken its maximum amount of wounds, it is unusable. And once one vital body part has taken enough wounds to be disabled, that being the head or the torso, the character dies. It's also pretty reasonable to assume that when multiple limbs are disabled, the character also dies. When a healer heals a character, they heal a specific body part's hit points. Other spells may specifically affect the character's blood pool, but blood is definitely separate from hit points. Presumably the blood pool going down to 0 will also cause a character to die. And I'm sure healers will also have spells that restore blood, but in general healing spells affect body parts. Now as I said earlier, I have quite a bit to say about this, but I will do so in the separate video tomorrow. For now, let's just accept this system as fact and move on to the classes as always. So first off, we have the Arthurian healer, the Physician. Medieval and even late classical medicine were very rudimentary and often very wrong. Practices like cupping and bleeding were commonplace and all manner of placebos were used. Opposed to this, alchemy was positively advanced. Alchemy was a proto-science practiced in varying forms across most of the known world during the Middle Ages all the way through the Renaissance, and even after Robert Boyle pioneered the scientific method in the 17th century, alchemy was still the predominant discipline. In 1720, distinctions were first made between alchemy and chemistry. But alchemy was still practiced all throughout the 18th century, even though it was definitely on the decline by this point. Despite popular belief, the alchemists of old were not necessarily charlatans or liars. They weren't necessarily stupid either, they just didn't have the scientific method to rely on. Nowadays, with the scientific method, we don't believe anything, we don't assume anything in our scientific endeavors. We theorize and then we experiment and prove things or disprove other things. Back in the alchemy days, however, a lot was based on belief and especially tradition, and also wisdom. If your alchemy master told you something, you just simply believed him and took that for gospel. Once people graduated into full-fledged alchemists, they would of course then experiment on other things, but once something was established, nobody wanted to rock the boat. In Camelot Unchained, the physician uses alchemical compounds to heal and cure their allies. Potions can be prepared in advance and possibly even handed out to group members, or they can be thrown in combat. Potion bottles and solvents will have to be made by crafters in advance, and they will then have to be expended by healers whenever they cast their magic, making them sort of like arrows for archers. However, for the physician, there is an effect and possibly more to replenish some of this solvent without having to get entirely new ones. From the theme of the class, I would also expect there to be ground or especially cloud effects via smashing bottles on the ground to create vapors. And there's definitely lots of cool possibilities with that. Next up we have the Viking healing class, the Stone Healer. Runestones held incredibly great significance in Germanic and Norse societies. They were spiritual symbols in holy places, historical records, grave markers full of the deeds of lords, and even territorial markers. A lot of these runestones can still be found throughout Denmark, Sweden and Norway to this day. Sadly, there are very few runestones or runic records left in mainland Europe, because especially the areas of Germany and Poland were hit much harder by Christianization, and much earlier at that. And then there were also a ton of wars fought there, and over the years there's just nothing much remaining. However, if you're ever in Scandinavia, it's actually a really cool thing to go around and look for these runestones, because some of them are quite impressive and awesome if you remember that some of them predate the Iron Age. The runes of the elder and younger Futhark were not used for mundane writing. Knowledge of the runes and their sounds, i.e. reading and writing, was left to shamans, poets, historians and other wise men learned in the art. Using them in the way that we use our letters today was not really thought of. It's not that it was sacrilege or anything like that, it was just that it wasn't done that way. There was just nothing important enough to be chiseled into stone or carved into bone with runes. The runes were said to have been discovered by Odin, the Allfather, while he hung from the tree Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear Gungnir. Odin has always been represented in two very distinct ways, as the shining armor-clad warrior and Allfather, or the long-bearded, almost Gandalf-like wise man. Personally, I always kind of preferred the Gandalf version because there are already so many strapping, young, combat-ready lads among the Aesir. In Camelot Unchained, the Stone Healer applies runestones either directly by throwing them at his group mates, or by setting runestones on the ground that then grant auras to surrounding group members. Just like the physician, the Stone Healer needs runestones that need to be crafted beforehand by crafters, but unlike the potions can sometimes, or perhaps even always, be picked up again after the battle is over. Throwing stones of course implies projectiles, but at the same time Ben hinted during the livestream that throwing can be done on the move, so maybe the Stone Healer is a bit more mobile and his spells are instant based. That would certainly fit the aggressive Viking realm. And lastly we come to the Tuatha Dan healer, the Empath. Dian Cecht is the god of healing in Irish mythology, and there are two great healing stories about him. In one he foresees that there's something amiss in a child of the gods, and upon inspection he indeed finds 3 young venomous serpents in the child's heart. He carefully removes them, kills the serpents, burns their bodies and then throws their ashes in the river Barrow, thusly named because the serpent's ash caused the river to boil because it was so poisonous. The other tale is of King Nuada, who lost his arm in battle against the fierce Bolog, and thus was no longer fit to rule the lands, and thus was no longer fit to rule as the king because the law called for a king to be in perfect health. Dian Cecht fashioned him a perfect arm replica out of silver. It was gorgeous and moved exactly like an actual arm. It was a masterpiece, but it was still not good enough to get Nuada reinstated as king, until his son Mirch made an even better replacement arm of flesh and blood. All was well. Nuada was once again fit to be king and the peasants rejoiced. Except that Dian Cecht was so jealous he killed his son. Mir's sister Ermid cried over his grave so long that from her tears all the healing herbs in the world grew, and she arranged and catalogued the herbs very carefully, but once again, Unchained was so jealous that he scattered the herbs, destroying his daughter's work. Legend says that this is the reason why we don't have cures for some of the simplest diseases today. Thanks, Unchained, you dickhead. And what does this have to do with the Empath, you ask? Nothing at all. In Camelot Unchained, the Empath damages their own health and draws their own blood to heal their allies. They also get the ability to summon a simulacrum with a spell, which will then use the simulacrum's health instead of the caster's. Which means that the Empath won't always have to give his own life to heal. I don't really find that there's much else to say about the Empath, and beyond the concerns that I will raise in my specific healing and health system discussion video tomorrow, I must say that I don't have much faith in this class. Sorry City State Entertainment, but out of 27 classes, there's one that I dislike. That's a pretty damn good ratio. I've played a few other MMORPGs that had healing classes that gave up their own hit points to heal, i.e. health transfers. And whenever this happens in a PvP situation, it just always ends up being weak, and not because the healing values aren't strong enough or anything like that, but simply by virtue of the healer helping the enemy team kill him faster. And even if it all works out and the Empath's heals are really crazy strong and ends up being balanced, it definitely has the potential to be super unpopular with the players that generally really like healers. And that's not very good for the Tuatha De Danann because there's only one healer for every realm. Basically, this is similar to what I raised with the Mjolnir. Having one of the 3 heavy tank fighters focus on something that is not at all heavy or tanking is just weird because there's not going to be a replacement, at least not in the beginning. And I'm just simply not sure how well that is going to work with either one of these roles. Right then guys, first time that I legitimately don't like one of the classes, but the other 2 I think are awesome thematically, especially the Stone Healer. If I got to choose, I would prefer something based more on Unchained for the Tuatha De Danann healer. Maybe with his jealousy playing a strong role in the class. Say for example, enemies around the healer have a higher health pool at the moment than the healer himself, then he could have an ability that drains all that blood and adds it to his own, and anything that goes above his maximum blood gets split up over his group members. Or maybe the ability to temporarily negate wounds in a body part of a friendly target by turning it into a perfect silver replica, or any number of other ideas. Now scoring obviously becomes a little bit easier with the Empath sadly being out of the race, and I already kind of gave away that I preferred the Stone Healer over the Physician. So grats to the Vikings, who are now head to head with the Tuatha De Danann. Next week, the last reveal is actually going to decide it all. And I swear, I did not set this up. Alright guys, that is it for today. If you enjoyed this series on the class reveals so far, please consider liking, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing as well. Remember that there's going to be another Camelot Unchained video tomorrow, specifically about the discussion surrounding the healers and the health system. And next week Sunday, we will talk about the stabby classes that will be revealed on Friday. But until then, I've been the CloakingDonkey, and I'll see you in another video.